Like the sex conversation is happening inside a container of I want to be with you forever. It never enters my mind to not be. My name is Figs O'Sullivan.
And I'm Teale O'Sullivan.
We're emotionally focused couples therapists, and we're a couple.
In an act of sheer bravery
or foolishness,
we're sharing our own couples therapy sessions with the world.
Watch or listen to us fight,
cry,
laugh,
and repair.
Then grow in your relationships along with us through the insight we share as couples therapists.
There's a little kid inside of each of us just reaching out for love and connection.
Let's begin to reach back out to each other.
Welcome home.
This is Come Here to Me.
Hello and welcome back to
Come Here to Me with Figs
and Teale.
So look, this week's episode, we're not going to talk very long beforehand. I'm, of course, excited and terrified because we talk about sexy time. Sex. By the way, when I talk to my clients, I often say, look, we can talk about sex, but we can only talk about it if we call it sexy time. Right. But yeah, we, in our therapy session that we're going to share a very large portion, if not the entire episode with you, we are talking about our own sexual intimacy, our own relationship with sexual intimacy, and it's a process.
Well, I'm feeling so silly right now. And, that experience, that couples therapy session was really deep for us and really bonding.
This one, the one we're going to talk about today.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
And in real life, I'm still feeling the reverberations of it.
Yeah.
And it feels really good. And I'm kind of silly right now. So I'm like, wow, there was like a somberness in that session. And I'm like this silly Teale right now.
Yeah, but that's really important, Teale. Again, I think, this whole trusting the process is so important that going into these places that are so hard, so scary to talk about, while we're talking about them, it can seem like, oh, this is going in a really bad direction. But trust going into those places. Actually, it's so good to have the experience of what it feels like now, that it makes me feel less constricted and more acceptable. It makes you feel like, the answer to some of your love needs.
Yes, it really does.
Which are
feeling important and cared about and chosen.
Right.
And so, isn't that amazing? It just shows up in our relationship. Figs and I have had a lovely last couple days.
Yeah.
Just had some hiccups like anyone, but teeny tiny ones, just bouncing back with resilience, feeling stronger between us.
But also because this episode is about, intimacy, just more, contact physically and, intimacy and sensuality and some weird play that you initiated that I don't want to talk about.
When I have you dress up like the Hawaiian Mina bird, it's always an erotic experience for me.
I'm not sure if I'm as into that role play, but I'd go with it.
I like that you go with it. It's just you choose my pleasure sometimes.
Thank you. But look, all joking aside, again, just talking about these things that are really hard, trusting the process, even though we both feel vulnerable feelings, and just blown away how it always makes me feel better. And this session, as you'll hear me say, I was the most scared of. I was by far the most worried about talking about this because I'm like, oh no.
Right.
This will be really tough and I don't know if it'll go well. But I thought it was beautiful and healing. Now listen, I really think we're going to try and keep this session almost in its entirety and release it. So please, what I invite you as the listeners, or if you're watching this on video, it's a really vulnerable place for me. It's a vulnerable place for Teale. I am so grateful that you, Teale, are willing to actually share some of these parts of yourself. And obviously, this is kind of what I've longed for, is that we would use our ability to feel our own feelings, share our feelings, be in process, trust where it's scary, to actually try and help other people, not just be expert therapists, but actually be role models. And
thank you for sharing, Figs.
I hope it does help. Thank you, Teale. Thank you for acknowledging me. So here's our therapy session where we talk about sex and intimacy.
I would love for us to talk about sex and intimacy.
Okay.
And then, and like, I feel like we've had what usually happens is we don't talk about this for a long time, and then there's kind of like a blow up about it, and then we end up having a pretty good conversation and kind of rededicate to prioritizing, this part of our relationship, and that we've done that with varying success. And just what's it like for you to have this as a topic that's at least important to me, and that and it takes courage for me to bring it up with you, so maybe that can be something that you guys can acknowledge.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm nervous about it. I'm scared about it. And probably more so now than any other time that we've talked about it. I'm scared about it. Like, in part, just to put context, we did a sex training for our whole team. We had someone come in and give a 2-hour, sex therapist training. The person who's also an EFT therapist. But just why that makes me even more scared is like, I feel like, you've even more of a bee in your bonnet to talk about it. And to go into it in details. Like yesterday we had a conversation about how, like for like a clinical consultation conversation about how could I bring up with a couple their sexual preference menus. This is which is
like a stage 2 intervention. It was literally, I was like wondering if I could do this with a stage 1 couple, and through the conversation we both didn't really know, and we kind of got to an answer, and I really appreciated you. But, I think just to reorganize the statement that it's more like I have a bee in my bonnet.
I used the wrong expression.
No, I'm not mad at
I should have known there'd be something that was triggering.
Sweetie, stay in contact with me. I'm not mad at you. What I'm trying to do is, like, I hear that you're scared, and that, creates some extra tenderness in me. And this is not like, let's talk about all the ways this is not good. Because it is really good when we do it, and it's more just like about an attachment piece for me. And so let's maybe stay in that place.
Sure.
I'm trying to, I'll just say for both of you, I am trying to be more conscious about my ways that I can be private around my own, relationship with sex and intimacy. And so for me, it does take courage. Hopefully you can see that and hear that too, is that, bringing it up with 2 men.
Yeah, it's a lot.
And I feel like I'm being brave, and I want to, believe me, I want to have a successful conversation. And for me, a successful conversation about sex is not like, these are all the things that are not going right. That doesn't go well with you, and it doesn't go well with me. And so I'm just trying to be like, hey, let's just be brave and maybe dip our toes into this. And it's not like, let's talk about our sexual menus today, Figs. It's more just like...
There's one thing, one thing you said, you were trying to work on your privacy. Are you trying to work on being able to be less private? Or
yeah, and Figs has actually been, has said, hey, I think this would be helpful for us to have this conversation... before we started doing this with you, and before we started a podcast based on our therapy, we were thinking about doing, some exploration in video and letting, people know. And to me, I'm just like, I know we've talked about before, can feel pretty private, and I had a lot of shame about that, because in Figs and my relationship, I'm more of like a pursuer for intimacy and sex. And I think there's a lot of shame for both partners in a hetero relationship when that's the dynamic. Because society tells women you're supposed to always be pursued for sex, and society tells men in hetero relationships you're supposed to always pursue for sex. And so both people can feel like crap about this when it's this dynamic. And in the reality, I'd say about 95% of the people that I've worked with over 7 years, couples in hetero relationships, it is this dynamic. And I do think it's empowering for people to know more about our experience. And I think it's important for you and I, because we can get a little bit quiet about it.
Right. Absolutely.
That's familiar for you to be the distancer and her the pursuer?
The distancer when it comes to sexual intimacy, yes. I think that's a fair... description of dynamic between us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know where's a good place to jump in, but...
I have an idea. What if you each talk, and maybe it's too intimate or too vulnerable to share with me, and that's fine, but what if you talk a little bit about the arc of positivity about your sexual attraction and sex with each other just for a moment, to each other? Does that make sense?
Kind of. You mean like what it was like when we first met each other and all that
How
stuff?
you drawn, and what's really good about your lovemaking? What's been really good about it for both of you? Does that feel?
Yeah, that sounds great. I like that idea.
Okay, sure.
Can I start?
Yes.
No, why don't you start? It's like I feel like it's going to be too much positive for you and you're going to kind of shut down.
Well, yeah, I think what... Yeah, I don't know about, yes. Like, I think part of what can happen for me is, just expectation. Like, doing something really good or connecting really deeply in the past becomes a burden for the present and the future.
I guess I'm not hearing this, like, necessarily about the past. Just, like, what's good about, like, our sex and intimacy. More in the present, like...
Yeah, I mean, I brought up the past only as something that you might start in your mind saying, wow, this was really good and this still is good about when we do make love or when we are sexual.
Yeah.
I was really drawn to Teale. I was really attracted to her for this. And I remember my passion for her. And I still feel that when we're doing that or something.
Right. Yeah. Right. Well, yeah, this is an interesting moment. There's a pretty, it's not the place that I'd rather start. I mean, I can do that, but it feels like a bit of an abandonment of what's really true for me to do that right now. And I don't mean those things aren't true, but again, it's just not where I'm at. Where I'm at right now, like I said, is scared. And that seems like I would be trying to do something different. Like I would have to kind of collapse a little bit of what I'm really feeling to do that thing, right? Because let me just say like a little. Look, I have sexual trauma, right? Like I've stuff when I was a kid with relatives and stuff, and it's not the first time I've been in a relationship where I was very, very attracted to Teale. We had like a wonderful honeymoon sex life, right? It was amazing and wonderful and awesome. And then as, the way I think of it, as, we got more like family. Right. I'd be in his effort barking her head out. Let me see. As we become more like family-like, I'm less motivated or have less desire to be sexually intimate with Teale.
Figs, this dynamic from seeing couples. It's pretty common.
Oh, exactly. I know it. Exactly. No, I totally... Yeah, it's... Right. I know it, and it doesn't necessarily make it, and rightly so, it doesn't make it any less painful. Right. I would say it's the thing that makes me the most unacceptable in our marriage and in our relationship, or both that it actually does and makes me most fearful it does, right? And this is, look, it's interesting. Like, I don't like, Teale make fun of me. I don't like when I'm even inadvertently touched. The kids touching my private parts, or Teale, accidentally, putting your feet on, my crotch while watching a movie. It's kind of like I really am, what do you call it? Contract in those moments, right?
And does this have to do with your
probably, who knows? I imagine so. So look, in some ways, my relationship with my sexuality is I was a very holier than thou because I'm the son of a single mother and had a sister. I was very, what do you call it, reverent of women. And, I probably didn't feel and be in my sexuality as much when I was a teenager. And then in my late 20s, 30s, I kind of was, but I did it through this kind of mask of seductiveness. Like I feel like it wasn't necessarily me. Wasn't about sensuality as much as it was about like seduction.
Or power.
Exactly. Power. Yes. And so, some idea that deriving self-worth from being desirable or wanted or seductive. Mm-hmm. But then when you strip all that away, which look, again, I joke, when you strip all that away, right, which, gets stripped away in a marriage, right, I'm not comfortable with being sexually intimate without those things. So when I'm not comfortable with my being sexually intimate without the seduction, without the it's a mental exercise more than a physical exercise, and then you add the trauma piece I have feeling invaded around sexuality, whatever it is. It's just not an easy thing for me. And I understand that's a pretty shitty thing for Teale, right? That's what my relationship to sexuality is. In a long-term intimate relationship, it's kind of gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So that now, with all that said, what I would say then, now I could say what I like about, so yes, when we first met, look, it couldn't have been any better, which is great. It's really good to know that, we couldn't have been more attracted and had better.
You guys were dancing? You were doing the dance stuff?
Yeah, we danced, it was amazing, right, for me. And I really remember that. It's not like there's, it couldn't have gone any better. And that's really important because, look, I know this has nothing to do with Teale. Literally, it just doesn't matter. It's, the negative part of it doesn't matter, right? Because Teale is as wonderful and awesome and sexy and attractive and desirable a partner as I could possibly have, and I still have all these things. Right. If she was, and I just make it, I always use this as a joke, right? I don't actually have celebrity crushes. If she was J-Lo, J-Lo and I would be having the same conversation. Right. I don't care about J-Lo at all, right?
I hope you have celebrity crushes. That's okay, because honey, I do too.
You do. Good. But and this is a really important thing for me. I can't answer the second question when the first question is really, always what am I really with right now, right? So now, having said all that, what I like about our sexual intimacy now is we do show up infrequently, but at least we do show up and actually be sexually intimate with that reality. We do, there is a level of acceptance and in moments lightheartedness about that being the reality. That's really nice, right? As nice as it can be given, expectations and fears. And
I hear you saying that with the reality of the having kids and having long-term familiarity with each other and aging and all of those things.
Exactly.
and your own resistance to sexual intimacy,
Yeah.
you still are able to have sex some.
Exactly. Yeah, the pipes still work. And that is another thing. It's like, as I've, man, it's just age or who knows, but like, it's funny, like I definitely need more spaciousness. And again, it's not like spaciousness because I need the pipes to work, like to be able to have an erection or anything like that. It's more like, I'm definitely I need more time, which of course we don't have, right? We just don't have let's just relax our nervous systems, chill out. Like it's more like, okay, we have probably 20 minutes before the kids slam the door. Like, what the hell are you guys doing? Right. But look, the big thing, like my biggest fear is like, it's just, and why I don't always want to talk about it, like, it's just not acceptable. Look, people get, like, like Teale can be like, and I just have my fear, I'm not saying this is what's true. Teale can be like, yeah, no, I get, like, I love you, thank you. But it's not, and understandably, my fear, it's just not an acceptable thing.
Sounds like it's a burden for you, feeling how Teale must feel, what you imagine Teale feels about
exactly.
it. Yeah.
Well, if it's okay.
Because I just don't want her to be hurt, and I know that it can be hurt.
But let's bring in another part of
yes.
trauma, which is not childhood trauma based, but like Figs, because this has happened in past relationships, it's my understanding that sometimes partners have, reacted in ways that have been painful for you.
It's so interesting. I really don't think about that. Like, are you talking about like someone like cheating or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the funny thing is, like, that's not, it's, it probably should be, but I don't, for me, the burden, what's much more burdensome is them being hurt because of a deficit of mine, self-perceived deficit of my own, then like that they may do something bad. Like I don't, for better or worse, that's not how my mind operates. Like I'm not, it's such a secondary, tertiary fear that someone could cheat or exit the relationship. That doesn't mean that it wouldn't exactly improve my life if that happened. It would complicate everything. But, it would be bad. But it's just not as big of a burden for me of my neurotic space as being a disappointment and feeling bad that you don't get what it is you long for.
Great.
That's much more painful.
I'd love to have a chance to respond to what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. But let me just, the last thing, let me know this, because it's just good to, I guess, get it out. But look, there is a part of me, like sexuality with the same. Look, sexuality with someone I don't know, that's easy, right? And there is none of these burdens. So it's not as if like I couldn't see someone go, oh, it's not like I'm not a sexual being. It's just like we're like unburdened by trauma, unburdened by familiarity. Like I'm still like a sexual person. That energy is still alive inside me. It just gets really like scared and contracted inside, a primary attachment relationship.
Yeah, and I think Figs and I have talked about like that leaves us both a bit susceptible to potentially cheat on one another. That, and that's not a conversation we've had for several years, but just in terms of opening up our relationship proactively as opposed to reactively, and that's not something that we're interested in doing, but I'll just say that the unfamiliarity of someone else and that sexual aliveness that he has inside of himself, it could lead to like a vulnerability in our relationship for him, right? And then, and then my own vulnerability in turning out to, someone else that was more sexually attracted to me and that I could feel that feeling of being desired, which is really, really has been historically important to me, and it feels much less so to me now. So I just wanted to say that piece. It's not like an impending threat that I feel.
Right, I understand. But there's...
And by the way, the same for me. Like now it seems like in 99% of my waking moments, the idea of being hello, like seductive, or like it just seems ridiculous. Like, you know, I was just saying, I love hip hop music in foreign languages, right? I really like it, but as long as I don't have to hear the juvenile lyrics
of something,
like, you know, of like being seductive, or like, you know, yes, not all hip hop is like that, but I like pop hip hop, but the lyrics like kill me. It's like I can't relate to like those kind of like, yeah, I'm sexy, ooh. Like, you know.
Yeah, well, there's something about having a family that's sort of...
Well, exactly, yeah. I hate the way some of my favorite songs, I can't play them for the kids. But yeah, no, I guess like, yeah, I think we're both susceptible to like candy, like, you know, that someone come along and go, Teale, you're so sexy, and you're like, oh, that's nice. And I, you know, like to feel those parts of myself that are in there, but I guess it's scary to feel them with you because of my own stuff. Yeah, like it's I was going to say compelling, but it's actually not compelling at all.
Well, thank you. And let's go into like the there's a deeper part here, which is like you've expressed a couple times just about what feels like a really unacceptable part of yourself.
Right.
And so that
within a relationship. It's unacceptable.
Yeah. And so I think that
I judge it so, and I imagine it is for you.
Can I ask, is that the source of part of the fear, the scared part, the unacceptable part, when you think of being intimate?
Well, yeah. It's what makes it hard to approach it, because, look, ultimately, yeah, it's not okay to feel this way, right? So it's hard to approach intimacy, again, in two ways. Like, I don't think it's okay, no matter what Teale says. And I imagine no matter what Teale says, it's not actually okay for her, because she doesn't get to feel the way she longs to feel. So yeah, it's hard to willingly go to like volunteer and initiate.
I don't really like that. I hear that.
No, that's my thought.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that's how you feel. That's the way I have and you know, it's, again, that's part of what traps me in inertia. That it is a factor. Like the way now I have a story built up around it.
And I think what I notice is like a similar thing happening for me right now that can happen just when we have these conversations, which is like, and I'm scared to sound mean, but it's just, I'm like, whoa, this is really, really complicated.
Exactly.
You know, and so, and there's a part of me that's just like I get kind of like scared off, like, oh my God, like I can't seem to say anything to make you feel more, you know, acceptable, and, you know, pieces around sexual trauma, and like, oh my gosh, you know, could you find that aliveness with someone else? It's just, it all feels very overwhelming for me. Not that you're overwhelming, I just am getting overwhelmed. And so what happens inside is that I just kind of like back off. Like there's a part of me that's just like, I don't know what to do. And so I think that this has affected me, my own, like I'm naturally a really pretty high libido person, not necessarily just with a partner, but with myself. Like I have a very, you know, gratifying, awesome, just self-pleasuring world. And like, and I can say, oh, maybe it's my age. I'm 37, which is like technically sexual prime, that I feel, you know, it's probably stress and life stuff anyway, but it could also be this, is that I'm pretty dulled in that sense right now. And I think I'm just kind of emotionally, like, I don't know where to go. I don't know how to talk about this. I don't know, and I don't necessarily need to change it. And I think in some ways, I don't think it's dulled because of figs. I think I just have a lot of life factors going into this. Like, so I just feel, even right now, like I feel small and I feel overwhelmed. And I think just like, I don't feel like you're unacceptable. It makes me like, love you and want to talk about it. And I think what I notice is we both get kind of silent about it. And then, and now I think the reason why I want to bring it up more often is like, I felt like for so many years, even though I seemed to want to have sex more than you did, that you would kind of like have this thing like every couple months and be like, I want us to make time. And like, you haven't said that anymore. You don't say that anymore.
Right.
And like, it just scares me that like the opening is getting smaller.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, I do want to make time. Like, having conversations like this really helps me. Like, I didn't say that part. It was just, I wanted to, it is complicated, and I wanted to share some of the internal complexity. But doing that really helps me feel like it's safer to try and like come towards and connect with you in this vulnerable, complicated emotional space. Once it's okay that it is complicated, and that like, complicated as in it is, full of vulnerability.
A
lot of things. And that's what makes it easier for me to go, well, let's make the time. And that's the most important thing.
How do you feel, Figs, just hearing Teale's tears?
Yeah, I feel terrible, right? This is the thing that I'm like, I feel really sad for you, and I feel, and it feels like, confirmation on one level of, it's too hard. It's very hard to be with me in this aspect of relationship. So I feel bad about myself. And I appreciate that we're talking about it. There's a way that it feels. It's even though those things are true, it also feels, it helps me feel closer to being able to be intimate more often, not further away from it. So all of those things are true.
Yeah. I think, one thing, just to let you know a little bit about my history in terms of partnership and sex and all that stuff, not to get, too detailed, but just to help you recognize that I've had 3 major relationships in my adult life.
Yeah.
I've had, many more sexual experiences, but 3 primary relationships, and all of my partners have had sexual trauma.
Right.
And that none of my partners were ever able to be open and honest with me about what they were experiencing.
Right.
And I didn't have as long to be with them, and we didn't have as much maturity, but there was a time where it felt like, sex kind of like dwindled or started to kind of go out in a similar type of like loneliness and concern. And of course, what I'm not saying is that, so I'm appreciating this conversation for that reason. And you're just like knowing about yourself and being open with me from the beginning. Like, some of this trauma I heard from other people came out at the end of our relationships, and it was really, really agonizing for me to know that they'd been hurting so much. But with myself is I can feel, when you said just in opening this conversation, like Teale is this, attractive and, sexual partner or whatever, however you said it, is like, it felt really like news to me that you felt like that. And like,
oh yeah, but wasn't that obvious when we met each other?
It was, but I don't hear you say it now.
Right.
And so hearing you say it now, it's like feeling like a plant that hasn't been watered suddenly getting watered. And I'm not trying to say that to tell you what a disappointment. I just like, I don't know that you feel that way. And I know, Figs and I have talked about like not having desire for me in the ways that we had in the beginning, and that at times in our relationship being really hard for me, but something that I've like integrated.
I was moved by your sharing such a vulnerable place that probably makes you feel bad.
Right.
A place of shame. And especially since, it sounds like maybe it's something you've known about with other partners too.
Exactly. Yeah.
And on one level, I want to normalize it, which I think you already do, because you know that this happens to people in long-term relationships, especially with kids. But on the other level, I was thinking the vulnerability of it, I got the impression it felt like a relief to be able to speak to it.
Yeah, well, yeah. It's always, I always find a huge relief in just being more fully and honestly, openly in whatever I'm actually truly feeling. It's always better because I'm already fully in it, but hiding it on some level from myself, from other people, like distancing from it. So it's always a relief to be I'm actually still fully in it, but now minus any trying to minimize it or hide it is always a relief.
I guess my question is, from that place of having some relief with having shared it with Teale, when Teale has some sadness about, not feeling like you ask for the two of you to have special time together as often, for her to share that almost tearfully, I wondered if there's a way that you could slow down with that too and not go to this I'm bad place.
Oh, of course. Absolutely. Absolutely. It totally makes sense that you would feel that way.
It's like an intimate moment, actually.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, no, that we both feel our vulnerability at the same time. Absolutely. Yeah. Love you.
Love you.
No, I know, but by the way, I want to make sure. Say, what was it you were saying at the very end?
Well, I mean, it just feels so, like, obvious and cliche, but I'll just say it anyways, that I can feel, it's like I have my own history with sex and being, a woman that has been perceived as attractive over my life and feeling desired and, getting a lot of sort of my ego stability based on that being like a sexually attractive person. Mm. And so I can have, and I feel like, through our love and through our communication about this and my own just maturing out of like this being a really important part to be seen in this way, I have had, I think, susceptible moments in our relationship where I wanted to feel sexually attractive to someone. So like, I've never like followed those leads, but it's kind of, I think just a vulnerability for me, and ultimately I want to be attractive to Figs. Like all of that is reactive for me, and I'm proud of myself because it was a major piece for me, and that I've really kind of brought in and studied and turned towards. The reality is that when I'm hurting, that I don't think Figs is drawn to me, which is it's so much more complicated than that. But that's one of the kind of egotistical pieces that I get sort of snagged on, is that I can be reactive outside of that. And I've never done anything that was inappropriate for a relationship. But I feel that as like kind of like a red flag that I go to. So it helps me to just like hold that up and be honest about and like I really and I think anyways but I can feel bad about myself. I can wonder, am I fucking attractive? Like maybe I'm not, and if I'm not, like okay, like that's okay, I've got other qualities, but it has at times worried me, or Figs has said something just like about my body not kind of bouncing back after childhood, not in a mean way, but just like an honest way.
Go on. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Isn't it funny, right, that every single thing that you've said that hasn't kind of gone, and it's like I don't hear anything, but then I'll hear something that feels a little bit like negative. Right. It just goes and makes a case where I'm just like, oh shit, I am not a sexually attractive person. I was wrong about this all the time. And I'm not sexually attractive to Figs, and he doesn't want to have sex with me. And, I think I have a fear, the fear is like, oh my God, Figs doesn't even want to, like, he doesn't even talk about this anymore. Like, I have to be like, we're doing this. And, like, that feels really lonely for me. And I have a fear about, it's not a big fear, but I do have just a fear about like myself looking back at myself when I'm way older and just, I don't feel like, anyway, I shouldn't even say that, but I'm just like, I like want to have more sexual experiences and like, I don't want to just have like a relationship where we don't have sex ever. And like, sure. I want to, I'm working on like when we do have sex, I'm trying to like work on parts of myself where I bring pieces of myself to the experience that I don't think I've been able to before. And I just want to keep working on that. And even if it's infrequent and it's, intentional or it's shy, it's like I have a lot of range of what I feel is acceptable and wonderful. Right. And I really, to get back to the things that I found and find gratifying about being intimate with Figs is that I'm really attracted to him. And I don't always feel that way unless we're like in each other's arms. So it really helps me. I do feel attracted to his partner. No, I understand what you're saying, yeah. But just like, I'm like always like, he's so big and I'm little.
It's real reassuring to have physical contact.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing it. It all makes sense. I'm with you. Yeah.
What's it like just to hear about the ways that I like feel negatively about myself, like when we're not intimate? Like,
I feel terrible for you because, I think you're a beautiful, attractive person, like, in general, not just as my partner. And so it makes me very sad to hear that you hurt and suffered this way. Right. And of course I feel bad, right? I'm not disappearing, and I feel bad that I'm the one, because of what I don't do, that triggers that pain inside of you. And yeah, look, yes. And, as becoming a father, all the stuff, becoming a married father, business owner, my identity, like I have zero identity, like none of my ego identity is made up with being sexy anymore, right? And I'm not, like I want to work on this because I want us to feel, I want to be with you forever. I want us to, grow old and die together. And I want to work on the sexual piece because for our relationship and for you. But there's a little bit of a gap. I'm not actually that motivated to feel sexy. Mm-hmm. I'm motivated for our relationship to be fulfilling, but I'm not, it's not. So this is you're saying you feel lonely initiating. I'm motivated to do this for you and for us. And that doesn't mean I won't benefit from it, right? But it's not, I don't have a lot of ego identity anymore in being sexy Figs.
Right, but I guess like imagining it being like, that's not really what this is. That this is about like being, the vulnerable selves. And so
absolutely. Well, that I'm very happy to do, and like you said, but I hear like it's overwhelming that it's complicated. The vulnerable sex is much more complicated for my vulnerable self, right? It just is.
I think that's what makes you, Teale, kind of go, whoa, this is too complicated. I just want to have intimacy and tenderness and sex.
Well, I don't want to like have sex just because it's something I want.
Yeah, but I do feel really good when we do it. I enjoy it very much when we do it, and I feel it makes me feel really good afterwards, and I feel closer to you. So it's not as simple. It's not what I meant. I only want to do it because you want it. Like,
that is the truth. It's okay to stand by that. Well, just because it brings up grief for me, it doesn't mean that.
Yeah, but it's also like raising our kids and making them happy, I do it for them. It doesn't mean, like, to say that, no, I'm not doing it because I want to. Well, of course that's what I want to do. It just kind of feels like, yeah, but if you're not happy doing it, then don't do it. Like, that's what I want to do. Like, Like, just because it's emotionally challenging to show up for sexual intimacy, and my consciousness would go, shit, let's just avoid it. It doesn't mean that I don't actually enjoy it and then feel really good that I actually did that.
I think that's an important point, what you just said.
Yeah, like, it doesn't, just because it's not my like surface level consciousness desire to do it. A lot of things like working out, like freaking being a good parent, it's not my surface level consciousness desire to do those things, but I sure fucking enjoy doing them, and I feel much better about myself afterwards. You actually feeling loved and cared for, and us being connected to each other is amazing. And look,
I don't think that's
okay.
That's the part for me that just like wants to shut down.
Okay.
Because I'm like, again, I don't want this to be something for me and like making you be sexual. Like, when it's not, right. Like, I hear that it benefits you. It's kind of like, oh, I should work out, and that feels good after. But like, that's why I want us to make and discover and get curious about, is there something that draws you to this for your own, like, for your own sanity, for your own mental health, for your own physical health, and that's important to me as the incentive, and
absolutely.
Not like,
yeah, I can appreciate wanting that. And I was thinking all along that maybe the intimacy question for you can be an inquiry.
Exactly.
It's a growth opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. It's a growth opportunity for me. Like, showing up in a place that is scary for me, for connection and intimacy, is really, really good for me. And I actually really enjoy it. It's a really nice experience. It's really good. It feels good. Both sensually feels good. It feels really good that I'm connected to you. Of course, it feels awesome that you're happy. And again, this whole thing, like, don't do it to make someone else happy. I don't get that. You being happy has a profound impact on my life. That's just the way I'm built. Like, it doesn't make sense to me this, like, I shouldn't do something just for you to be happy. It fucking makes me happy if you're happy. End of. Now, the other thing is, and I really love how much more connected and light and playful we feel when we are attending to that part of our life. Being sexually intimate with you makes every other aspect of my life better. Why can't that be okay? Like, but I have to, there's an emotional hurdle I have to get over, because it's complicated on the front end emotionally to get those benefits. And I want to work on it for, like I said, because it's personal growth.
But I just wonder, is there a way that I can help with that? Because it sounds like a lot, hurdles and things that you need to work on, as though that's what this really is. That's how you're framing it. Okay. But is there a way that I can just help with that emotional aspect? And I think one of those ways, like, that's one of the things I was excited about thinking about, like, sensate touch. And that's something that you're, I think, actually better at than me.
Right.
And have maybe more experience with, and just have, and maybe we can talk about just how to create that, and more, because you're someone that benefits a lot from touch. Like, Biggs is very touch motivated. We do a lot of touching.
That's a great access point. And you can keep the expectations of having to have intercourse every time down, so that it doesn't have to be that.
Yeah. Look, in general, I do better when there's a structure around whatever the experience is. Right. And so, like doing sensei touch like that, where we're prioritizing sensuality and touching ourselves inside, touching ourselves and like each other, while the other is videotaping, live.
You're putting it on your podcast.
Exactly. But no, look, I like, I like showing up inside of containers, like fixed time, structure and then being intimate inside of it. Well, this is the thing, is don't give up pursuing. I feel like, and there's a weird thing, on some level, this conversation, there are parallels between this and me exercising. Look, I want to be intimate more. I want to work on the way I've got blocks, same as I want to work out. And I know it's a big ask, so that's why it's a big ask. Don't give up trying to make it happen. Like, I want to get past, my hurdle is on the front end, right? And I would like you to help me and not give up trying to get over that initial hurdle, right? Because, you know, like, getting over that initial hurdle, then, you know, like, you know, I'm greasing my body with oil all over me.
Okay,
like,
I will not.
But you know
give
what I
up
mean?
on you.
Yeah.
But also, Teale, there's a way that you can check in about whether that hurt place is coming up in you, because that hurt place probably is part of a cycle.
Right.
It's him feeling the burden of it, and the guilt and the shame about his not making you happy. And so you guys can kind of catch that earlier when you're doing this session. Touch.
I mean, I think, you know, I'm not going to give up on you, but I think I just want to be really real and honest. I know I have to end in a minute here, but just that, you know, there is a part of me that would feel like I am abandoning myself to reach at this point. Okay. And that I'm not saying I won't. I'm just, you know, it's helpful for me to hear. But I think there's a part of me that's now really small and scared.
Right.
And so I'd like to just be invited to come in as I am.
Exactly.
Like, I'm not just
absolutely.
This, like, sexual
that was just
goddess. I know, and I hear that, and it does
Yeah.
help me, and I'm going to work to integrate it. And I
Yeah.
also just want you to, like, maybe hear and help welcome out, whether it's just like with a hug, or I don't know how we do it, but just that, like, I'm actually really small and scared right now.
Right. Absolutely. I get it. And I'm here. I love you. And it's okay to be scared and worried, you know, like that it's scared for you, and that you would feel like you'd be abandoning yourself to reach, like, because it's such a vulnerable thing that you're at risk of being rejected, right? And that's what, like, you know, I think part of what wasn't spoken, I'd like us to, and I know, like, it'll be triggering, but to go back to where we actually have scheduled intimacy dates, right? Like, we actually have times that we show up to be really intimate with each other, so that both of us show up. Like, so it being structured and scheduled, I'm going to show up even though it's scary for me, and you get to just show up even though you're scared of being rich. Just a place that we create together, that we both get to show up vulnerably, regardless of the other times we might have to navigate this time. That we have on the schedule an actual place and time that we can do this. Are we really? Oh, we're at time.
I have a session too, but sorry to stop so quickly.
No, yeah. Well, thank you.
Thanks for being so vulnerable.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Love you, sweetie.
Love you.
Thank you for bringing it up. This hard and good conversation.
Good work.
Let's try and put it on the schedule now.
I think I'm actually, like, touching a childhood trauma place right now, just in feeling really small. So it's not like about sex anymore. It's just about being like chosen and not on my own.
Yeah, but Liz, I hope you hear, sweetie, I choose you completely. I don't know if you hear that. Like, this is happening inside, like, the sex conversation is happening inside a container of I want to be with you forever. It never enters my mind to not be. You're completely chosen. Just sex is an emotionally complicated part of it. It has nothing to do with you being chosen by me.
You know, I just feel like small and like I don't know how to reach anymore, and I'm scared to try it.
Hey, sweetie. Well, we don't have to. We can do where we just show up together, both of us vulnerable.
Well, I want to.
Okay. Yeah, well, yeah. And I want to work on it. Like, I want to show up and, like, you know, and be available and like keep us to doing it and for it to get easier.
I want you to be the leader. I don't know how to anymore.
Okay, sweetie, I will. Okay.
Just in showing up. We don't have to have sex. It's just showing up together.
Okay. Well, let's make a time right now where we could do that.
Thanks, sweetie, for choosing me so much. So lucky. I think you're so wonderful.
Thanks, sweetie. I think you're wonderful. You have a little. So thank you for listening and watching our therapy session. We'd love to hear any thoughts or what it brought up for you. Be gentle with us, though. It was kind of a vulnerable thing to share. It was actually vulnerable even just to watch it back, I gotta be honest.
Right.
How is it for you watching?
It was good. You know, I'm feeling proud of us, Figs. I think it takes courage for us to share, you know, about sex and intimacy. Right. And there's a lot of shame in our culture. Kind of made my wee heart proud. And I had a lot of hesitation going into it, some fears coming up. You know, what's it like to, you know, I'm going to be the woman bringing up sex and intimacy with two men, you know, Figs and our therapist. Yeah. And they were welcoming. And, you know, there were some big internal hurdles for me just being on the end of kind of pursuing for sex in our relationship between Figs and I, that I think there's some shame, again, cultural piece here around women. You know, a woman wanting to have sex and a man being a little bit more reluctant sometimes. And of course, the story is much more complicated than that. But just if I kind of put that in my brain and, oh, that's what I'm going to share. It's kind of vulnerable for me to share now publicly. Mm-hmm. And I think that my courage was, you know, really matched by your just openness with your past, Figs, and just sharing more about your perspective and your experience and your hurts and your fears, and like it really helped me just love you and feel, ultimately, this is the thing I'm really taking away from it, is I feel so chosen and so loved, and you love me so much, and you can be so afraid to lose me because you don't think you do something in the way that I want, and that's really deeply validating for me. So I came out feeling stronger and more resilient as a couple, and so for that I'm like, F yeah.
Yeah, it was a really powerful therapy session. Thank you for acknowledging me, and I think you're so brave. And I think you mentioned this in the session. Now, you and I have talked about this before, about processing sex and intimacy, and about, you know, me mentioning, like, I'd like us to be very open with other people, because this is kind of the whole way that we help people is, look, you're a vulnerable human being. Please accept it. Please surrender to it. Your partner is too. And there's nothing to be ashamed of. And yes, we have a right to privacy. And of course, we want to keep some things private. But like, God, I'm just so proud of you where you were reluctant before to model, look, I do have these vulnerable feelings. We do have this vulnerable, difficult process in our relationship. And even though we both turn away from it in our own ways, right? We both protest it being so vulnerable and painful. We're willing to move towards it like we did in this session and come out feeling closer to each other, right? The other thing that I just want to make sure for the listeners and viewers, just to highlight, so much of why this conversation that we had in the therapy session was successful for us to feel closer to each other is again down to the framing, how I frame who I am myself, how you frame who you are, how I frame who you are, and vice versa, and who we are together. We're vulnerable human beings. Our vulnerability makes sense. It makes sense that you would hurt when it looks like I don't want you. It makes sense that I would hurt primarily because I feel like, oh no, I'm a disappointment, and that I would contract, and that you could look, you know, in your way you protest disappointed, and we would get stuck. Right. Now, it's messy to get to that place, as you know, as we talk about it, right, because it's really scary. But what makes it work is we can get to this place where, look, neither of us are wrong. It's just a really hard, vulnerable place. And then when we meet each other there, all of a sudden this issue that felt like it had so little air to breathe, like it's in such a tight space, it's so dangerous. All of a sudden there's more space around it, and I can feel safer, and you can feel like it's okay to be scared and talk about it. So that was really powerful. The last thing I'll say, look, after the session ended, the video was still playing and the mic was still on. And I just think it's really important. And again, I just admire your courage so much on this. This sex and intimacy touches such a deep, vulnerable place, right? I can feel so ashamed of myself for being contracted around it. And I know you, as you described in the very end, when the session was over, right? It brings up such a deep, deep primary place of not feeling chosen. Right. I could see the pain you were in. And again, your willingness to share it, I just think it's so beautiful. Good job.
And you just were right there with me. I think that's the thing that was just so developmental for me.
Exactly. And that's the beauty about going into the middle of this conversation that's so hard, framing it this way. We actually, in the session and at the end of the session, we had an opportunity for you to actually feel chosen right now, and for me to actually be enough in a given moment of time. We stuck with the process and we feel closer. And yes, now we added furry Tuesdays, nuns and priests Wednesdays. But listen, so thank you for listening, and this will not be our last episode. I say now, while I feel not as contracted about it, I'm sure I'll be scared again. I'll contract again, as that's what we do, and you'll feel not chosen again, right? But we're going to keep showing up, and we will keep trying to be brave and include you and let you see how we go through the process to make sure we can stay connected, which is what we both, I certainly long for.
Me too. I love it.
Thank you, guys. We'll see you, and women and everybody.
Thank you all. We love you.
Yeah.
Keep fighting the good fight.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
This was Come Here to Me. Relationship experts walk the talk.
Visit comeheretoMePodcast.com for episode transcripts, social media links, and to subscribe to the mailing list.
If you or someone you love are struggling in your relationship, or just want to work on making things that little bit better, visit us at empathy.com. That's empathy with an I on the end, not a Y on the end. We've got quizzes, courses, videos, articles, and free consultations for couples counseling or for relationship coaching.